Welcome to Perspective with Derwin Webb. I am your host, Derwin Webb, coming to you from the Fraser History Museum. We have the pleasure of having a guest today that in Louisville needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce for the first time to some, but also known to many, Reverend Dr. Corrie Shull. Brother Shull, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you for this invitation, and it's always such a blessing and a delight to share space with you.
Man, I apologize to you. We have been trying to do this for a very long time. Our schedules finally have coincided that we can do this today. So I just appreciate you coming on to give a little insight about who you are as a person and also what you do on a day-to-day basis now.
Well, certainly. Who am I as a person? I try to be like Mike, Judge Derwin Webb. You've been a tremendous example for me as I have attempted to strive professionally and to level up as a man and as a human being and as a human that has black skin in this American context. So I appreciate you and I've admired you for the years that I have known you. My name is Daniel Corrie Shull. I'm a native of Nashville, Tennessee, born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, East Nashville to be exact. Um, I'm a proud graduate of Fisk University there in Nashville, Tennessee, and I have earned additional degrees, but they all pale in comparison to my beloved alma mater, Fisk University. I currently serve as the senior pastor of the Burnett Avenue Baptist Church here in Louisville. This is my 13th year of serving in that capacity, and I am also the vice chairman of the Jefferson County Board of Education, which gives me a lot of excitement, keeps me very busy, and keeps me really chest deep in the interworkings of this community.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that because in a second, because you identify yourself as a lot of different things. I looked at your Twitter page.
Mhm.
You identify yourself as a father, a friend, education enthusiast, and a senior pastor.
Mhm.
If you were talking to one of your boys, which one would you identify with the most?
Well, if I was talking to one of my boys, probably fatherhood. I love being a father. It's been probably the greatest joy of my life. It is also one of the most tremendous challenges. And when I say challenges, I mean in a positive way, like hiking Mount Kilimanjaro. It
Mhm.
requires of you strength in various capacities and for you to exercise muscles that you didn't know that you had.
Right.
And so probably the ultimate I guess part of who I am is being a father to my children and just the daily thrill of watching them grow and being a part of their development as people and trying to guide them as they navigate the beginning of their existences.
Well, since you're talking about children, you also mentioned that you're on the school board.
Right.
And I know that that's a heavy task. I know we have a lot of things going on in the community that needs your attention daily.
Right.
I know that you were talking about some things you have to do after this that relates to your position with JCPS. What made you want to be a part of the board to begin with? Because I know you're a senior pastor,
Mhm.
and I do know some pastors in other areas,
Mhm.
other cities that have done something similar.
Mhm.
But what made you want to get involved in the Jefferson County school system?
The lady who occupied the 6th District Board of Education seat was Dr. Lisa Wilner. I was a conversation partner and a huge fan of Dr. Wilner and really supported the work that she did on the Board of Education. When she decided to resign her seat and seek um, an office in the House of Representatives in Frankfurt, she approached me and asked me to consider running for the school board. I had never thought about it before. It had never crossed my mind. It had never been an ambition of mine. And I hesitated. I hesitated because I have children, because I have a congregation that requires a lot of attention. I have a lot of other interest in the world. At that time, I was working on my doctorate, and I did not know that I had the time. What ultimately was the deciding factor for me to run for the school board was that when I looked at the list of candidates who had filed to run, none of them reflected my values. None of them made me comfortable as a parent that they would be making decisions for my children. And because of that, I decided to run because I felt that I could bring a perspective, a community based perspective to the Board of Education that would center all children, but particularly children that have historically been marginalized in academic spaces, and that I could also be an encouragement to the work that JCPS had already undertaken around racial equity.
As I mentioned before, I have a couple of friends who are pastors in other cities that have done something similar to you. And they have spoken to me about some of the challenges that they have experienced being a pastor and on the school board, especially with the church. Have you had any kind of issues trying to blur the lines between the two?
The people of Burnett Avenue have been immensely supportive of all of the work that I have attempted to do in community. And I've not had to do much explaining to them about why I have sought this office and why I operate in this capacity. What I have said to them and what they have readily embraced is that my work in community, whether that be on the school board or whether that be in a variety of other capacities around the city, is an extension of my ministry to them and my pastorate at the Burnett Avenue Church. So I'm proud to say that they have been immensely understanding and encouraging of my work in public education. As it relates to the challenges that I have faced, I have not faced challenges from my church serving in this capacity. I have faced challenges from the community side because there are a lot of people in the world who believe that ministers ought to stay in a minister's place.
And that was my next question.
Ought to be preachers. That you ought not blur the lines of religion or faith and politics. And what I often say to the people who care to receive an explanation from me is that I am a product of the Black prophetic tradition or the Black church tradition. And so in the Black prophetic tradition or the Black church tradition, we don't seek to simply be a spiritual institution, but the Black church has historically had to minister holistically to people, mind, body, soul, and cultural welfare, which means we've had to not only pray in the sanctuary, but we've had to fight in the streets. We've had to seek public office in order to progress the aims and the prosperity and the well-being of our people. So as a minister, I have been really formed in the tradition and inspired by and trained after persons like Martin Luther King Jr., who of course led the civil rights movement. He was an ordained Black Baptist preacher. I've been trained in the tradition of Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who was the first congressman from Harlem, New York, who to this day has passed more legislation in the United States House of Representatives than anyone else that has ever sat in one of those seats in that August Hall of Power. I've been trained in the school of Calvin Butts, who served there in New York City, who not only was a pastor, he was also a college president. Reverend Ransom, and the list goes on and on and on of Black clergy who preached in the pulpit, but then practiced what they preached in the halls of power, whether that be in their local school boards or their local city councils, or all the way up to the United States Hall of Congress. And so I see myself in that tradition. And so I explain to people that is who I am. And then I go a step further and I remind people that I am a pastor, I am a clergy person, but I'm also a resident. And every citizen of this community has a right and a responsibility to participate in communal well-being, whether that be simply voting on voting day or whether that also be to seek office, where you can contribute to the welfare of the city.
Well, you've said the word community a couple of times now. What do you feel are the biggest challenges within your community or within your district? And if you feel those challenges are different from, let's say, a district like Joe Marshall or something like that, what are the challenges in your district right now?
My district is very diverse. So we span the gamut. We have everything from Snitzelberg and Goss Avenue and Camp Taylor, all the way to Newburgh and some parts of Fern Creek and even a strip of the Highlands. It's an incredibly diverse community. The challenges are also diverse. Right now, my focus is on the academic outcomes for children who are impoverished and children who are in minority communities. So JCPS is a majority minority district. That means that at least 60% of our student population is Black, Asian, Hispanic, immigrant. Yet those are the populations that actually achieve oftentimes at the lowest level. What I would like to see is us change curriculum, change pedagogical practices, change culture and climate in ways that directly contribute to increasing the achievement of those students. And so I think that's the greatest challenge that we're faced with right now.
Well, are those challenges the same in other places, or are they a little bit different?
I don't believe
your
so.
place?
So in my district, I have a lot of schools who are accelerated improvement schools, AIS schools. Those are schools that are under the watchful eye of the Kentucky Department of Education and that have student populations that have not achieved on standardized testing in the way that we would have liked to see. What we understand is that there is a direct correlation between academic achievement and the economic prosperity of an individual family. So in schools where there are high concentrations of poverty, we often see lower test scores. And so what we're trying to do is to allocate more resources to schools that have higher concentrations of poverty so that we can close the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. Because in some of my colleagues' districts, their students come from two-parent homes. They have a mom that drives them to school every day and picks them up. They have been enrolled in Kumon. They have all of the opportunities and the exposures and the resources that are necessary to ensure that children excel. In my community, in District 6, in most places, whether it be Black or white, there is considerable economic deprivation. There is considerable lack of opportunity as it relates to something simple as, where does your kid go to summer camp? Does your kid get to go to Camp Hi-Ho? Or does your kid get to go to somebody's auntie's house down the street around the corner? They serve them Kool-Aid all day and they, occupy their time by watching the television. That's what we refer to as the opportunity gap. And all of those things correlate to the achievement of our students. And so what a part of my work is advocating for those students and those families, saying that there are parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles who are doing their best to raise these children, but they don't have all of the resources that are necessary to give them a fighting chance. And so the public school system, which has an obligation to receive all of the children that are residents of Jefferson County, we have also got to make sure that we are centering the voices and the experiences of our neediest children to ensure that they achieve parity with children who don't have the needs that they may have.
Now, we talk about those needs and different things that relate to your district. I've been fortunate enough to be on a couple of cycles with you as far as campaigns. And I know that you've won a couple of elections. and you've been on the board for a few years now. Since you have taken that seat on the board, there have been a lot of issues of race come up.
Mhm.
Has the issue of race, gosh, I'm thinking about this is Black History Month as we speak. How has the issue of race affected and infected the school board since you've been on?
Well, it's always around. Race is always a specter. It impacts the school board on every level. It impacts the school board as it relates to the perception of Black school board members. There is often the perception that Black people are not as smart or not as capable as some, and we see that opinion and that perspective creep up in very insidious ways that reminds me often of the importance of my work as a school board member, and particularly my work surrounding racial equity and my insistence that the racial equity policy be implemented with full fidelity in every nook and cranny of JCPS. I don't want one program, one document, one proposal to go forward until it has been through the REAP, which is the racial equity assessment plan, because I understand, and what I have seen firsthand is the ways that people's racism undermines the ability to make decisions in a fair and equitable way, and also the ways that race tends to cloud people's ability to take leadership from certain personalities. So you can see race entering the picture from some of the highest levels, all the way to the lowest levels, as it relates to the sense of belonging as expressed by Black children. In our schools, to my complete and utter dismay, Black children express the highest rates of not feeling as though they belong in public schools, in public school classrooms, in extracurricular activities, and so forth and so on. And the highest expression of not feeling that they belong happen to be Black girls. And so I think race, unfortunately, continues to be a huge issue in public education, and I don't see it abating anytime soon. It seems to be the issue that is consistent, that rises its head at every board meeting,
Right.
that is a part of every decision-making process, that is a part of every person that is hired in a new position. How did they get that position above these other people who have the credentials and the experience, but they did not seem to have the hue that would be acceptable or palatable in that position. And so I think that race is critical. I think it's also as you talk about race, I've been pondering this. I maybe shouldn't say it, but the first time that I, as a human being, was labeled arrogant was by a white woman teacher in middle school. The most recent time, and by recent I mean this week, that I was called arrogant was by a white woman middle school teacher. And I've been holding those two experiences with me this week and pondering, what is it about me exactly that the best word that you can use to describe me is arrogant? Is it that I have the audacity to speak up for what I believe? Is it that I challenge things that are, that we try to slide through? Is it that I won't accept failure as the standard for my people and for all people, because I love Black people and I'm going to fight for Black people and advocate for Black people, but I also care for all of the marginalized and all of the forgotten, um, in this community, and particularly in our school buildings, um, which includes our Hispanic brothers and sisters who don't readily engage with JCPS because they're fearful of deportation and other ways of reprisal for their existence in this nation. So when you talk about race and how it plays out, I think it plays out in some overt ways. It plays out in covert ways. It plays out in policy, and it is why it is important for there to be not only Black faces at the table, but people who share and understand and have fully processed the Black experience to be able to fully and authentically process what's happening, and they're able to speak to it, and in any opportunity they get to sort of push it back, to push back on it, and to draw attention to it so that we don't continue to have the experiences that we have had up until this point.
I would tell you this, that discussion of race is not relegated to just Black school board members, but we'll talk about something else. Anyway,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the new school assignment plan. I did have someone, obviously I'm a family court judge, and I do deal with issues of education, educational neglect, and that issue came up in my court just this week. Can you talk about the new assignment plan?
The newest student assignment plan I am very proud of. At this point, I've got to shout out Chairwoman Diane Porter, who I call her the quiet lioness of public education. She's fierce and formidable as it relates to ensuring that all children have opportunity and access to not only a quality education, but other resources in community. Ms. Porter looked at the initial plan, which was simply a dual resides plan. It said, if you live in the West End, you can choose to stay close to home, or you can go across town. That's what it was. And she said, this will not cut it. I saw her single-handedly make phone calls to begin to address what had been proposed to the board and expand it. Expand it to include not only the West End, but to also include Newburgh. I saw the plan expand to include resources for teachers and for principals who are attempting to bring programming into their schools, which will positively contribute to the outcomes of students. It expanded to the place of ensuring that we had academic enrichment centers that would take up the slack of tutoring and accelerating children academically. I saw her challenge the powers that be to ensure that all of the community was a part of this plan, that it wouldn't be something that was just thrust upon the community, but that they would be a part of it and they would have their fingerprints on it. And until the week that it passed, I saw her work her hardest to ensure that the plan was acceptable and that it would be successful in ensuring that not only did we give Black kids the opportunity to have a choice in where they go to school, whether that be close to home, whether it be across town, but if you stay at home, if you stay close to home, you won't be going to a bad school. It's not a choice of now because of Miss Porter. If you go across town, you go to a good school. If you stay close to home, you go to a bad school. No, the fight was such that it ensured wherever you go to school, you're going to get a quality education. And so I'm tremendously proud of the plan, and I think it's going to be a game changer in public education here in Louisville.
Well, let me ask you a question. What do you say to the person who says that this is basically a rollback to Plessy versus Ferguson?
I say to that person, the difference between Plessy versus Ferguson and this is the opportunity to actually choose. Parents can choose where they want their child to go. They can choose how deeply involved they want to be in the school community. We talk about investment in the West End. A part of investment in the West End is building schools that can accommodate the residents of the West End. This student assignment plan does that. When we talk about this is a return back to Plessy versus Ferguson, we also need to recognize that the schools are already segregated. We have a notion that to send black kids to the East End means diversity, but that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the schools currently in the choice zone, they are not diverse schools. Many of the schools in the East End are not diverse schools. So what we need to talk about is resources. Are we resourcing schools equitably to ensure that schools with high concentrations of poverty receive the resources that they need to be successful? And are we ensuring that we achieve parity with schools that may be more prosperous? They have PTAs that are thriving, and they have booster clubs that are raising a bunch of money in order to aid their programming.
Yeah, I'm going to do a hypothetical situation.
Mhm.
I'm going to give you a new position. You're now the new school superintendent for
Oh
JCPS.
gosh, that's a nightmare.
What's your top priority?
My top priority is student achievement. I call myself an education enthusiast because I honestly and authentically believe in the life of the mind. I think there is no better gift that you can give to children than to teach them how to think. I think that school is for everyone. I'm probably in the minority now of believing that college is for everyone. I think being introduced to a liberal arts education, to the life of the mind, to the world of ideas, um, is something that every single human being ought to have access to. I think it is absolutely transformative and powerful. Not for your ability to make a lot of money, not for your ability to, gain prestige and access. I think education, the purpose of education is to develop one's mind and one's affections and to give one a larger appreciation of the world around them. So I don't think that there's any higher goal, any more loftier ambition than to ensure that every child develops a love of math, that every child develops a love of reading. I've not used most of my math skills since I left Fisk University. I've probably never used any of them.
Mhm.
But I think the opportunity to explore and to be immersed in all of the various ways that humans have found to make meaning of the
Mhm.
world around them, to make sense scientifically and mathematically of what is happening around us. I think that's very important. And I think it's a tragedy that so many children in our community have to be so burdened with community violence, with family dysfunction, with houselessness, with hunger, that they cannot fully immerse themselves in the activity of learning and develop a love of learning for the sake of learning, to love learning.
Right. Dr. King had a dream. What is yours?
What is my dream?
I know it's a pretty broad question.
It's
Okay,
a,
okay. How about this? What's your dream for this community?
my dream for this community is to become a tad broader, a bit more inclusive,
Mhm.
to not be so nepotistic and so I don't know who's watching this, but I guess I'm already out here now. Um, to really recognize the tremendous opportunities that we have as a community and to capitalize off of them, and not to seek to keep the community around, at a certain level in order that a few people might have the decision making capabilities. Um, yeah, so I think Louisville can be. I think Louisville's a great place. I actually love Louisville. People, they when I tell them when I travel and they say where you from, I say I'm from Kentucky, and they say, what's in Kentucky? And I love Kentucky, and I believe that Kentucky can really be a trailblazer in many respects if we seize the opportunity that is presently before us.
Now, early in the show, you mentioned a few clergy that have run for politics.
Mhm.
You know, talked about some things that Dr. King did as well.
Mhm.
We also know that Senator Warnock is currently in Congress right now for us.
Yep, Senator Warnock is my college dean, who I'm very, very. He's like my second father. He and Congressman Warnock were classmates at Morehouse College,
Mhm.
and when I first met Congressman Warnock in like 2007, it was because he was in the Fisk Memorial Chapel while I was a student there.
Okay, well, I'm sure you guys have had some conversations about, life, future. Do you see politics in your future outside of the school board? Because I don't care what anybody says. That's a highly political position too.
It is highly political.
So do you see something else in your future outside of just the school board?
I don't. But I'm a man of calling, and so the truth about my life is that I don't have a lot of ambition. I'm not a person of high ambition. Um, People look at me and they review, my resume, if you will, and they say you've accomplished so much at a young age, and that is true. Not much that I have accomplished has been intentional. It has been, quite honestly, God opening doors for me and my attempt to capitalize on those opportunities.
Well, I was going to say, if you look at the Bible, many of the people in the Bible didn't have great ambition, but they were placed in position by God to do great things.
Right.
So if those doors opened, I
If
guess
those
the
doors
question
open,
is, would you walk through that door?
I would. My life has been um, really interesting and really exciting because of God opening doors for me that um, I never anticipated, never sought after. And I have been enriched by just seeing where the journey has taken me. And so I would definitely be open to it. But, if the question is, do I aspire to a certain office? No, not particularly. I love my kids. I cherish the time to be able to, wrestle with my son and play with my daughter and watch movies and all of that. And but if the opportunity, presented itself, I would consider it.
Last question. What is one thing that you wish that people knew about you? And they may not.
One thing that I wish people knew about me that they may not. Probably nothing, because I seem to be becoming more and more of a private person. The older that I get, I relish in it, and a bit of mystery. There was something called the minister's mystique.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of stuff that I just have to leave.
Totally understand. Totally understand.
Maybe I would submit my love of hiking. I think that hiking is absolutely fascinating and enjoyable, and one of my pastimes over the past 5 years is discovering new hiking trails, whether that be here in the great state of Kentucky, Tioga Falls, or the Bernstein Trails, or whether it be in Phoenix, Arizona, Camelback Mountain, which is extraordinarily scenic. I think hiking, or even hiking in Jamaica, hiking is one of the things that I absolutely have found to be enjoyable, and I don't think most people know about it.
Well, I'm glad to know that because I love going to Red River Gorge.
Really?
So I have a partner now.
Oh, yes, sir.
All
Yes,
right,
sir.
all
Let
right.
me know.
I will definitely let you know when it warms up. We are going out together.
That sounds fantastic.
Doc, I think we've come to the end of our time, man. I
Okay.
appreciate you being here.
It's
been a pleasure being here. Now, you said some great things about me to open the show. I tell you this, I've watched you from afar for a very long time. And everything that I've seen about you has been extremely positive. You are a voice for not only your church, but for this community and for our people too. So I want to applaud you for everything that you do. And believe me, not only do I watch you, a lot of other people watch you too. And they love and we love what we see.
Thank you. Thank you.
I used to close the show by saying a tagline, and we're going to keep it here for right now. Doc, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what I say. At the end of the day, it's always a matter of perspective. Thank you for joining Perspective today, and thank you for being on this show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.